it looks like folks have been flown out to their breakout rooms. So if you're joining us here in the main room, you're more than welcome to do that. We'll just ask you in this room to go ahead and turn off your video if you don't mind. Great. And then let's see. All right, we should have the breakout room. Sorry, I'm just checking in on everybody real quick, Dustin, and then we'll get to you.
No problem. No problem.
All right, go ahead and get started, Dustin. Thanks. And Bridget on our team is advancing the slides, so you might just have to give her a little heads up when
no problem
to advance for you.
No problem.
Go ahead and turn my video off now.
Yeah, no problem. And as I talked about in the main room to start, what I'm going to cover is kind of a balance is what we're seeing out of the various congressional relief packages, kind of the balance I'm seeing for nonprofits in their decision making about their organizations, especially related to employment. So Bridget, you can advance. And I think what's important to understand, you're going to see from me over these next few weeks very similar slides because I want to make sure that people to try and simplify the complicated. I think it's very easy to read news reports and hear about an 880-page bill and be very overwhelmed. And in fact, what Daniel and them shared in the main room about, you know, the overwhelming information, that's really the case. And what I try and do is just make sure that people understand that not everything in 880 pages is important, let alone the other two bills. So it's important to understand that there were 3 congressional relief bills. The first one does not need to take a lot of people's time to understand. It was mainly about getting money into the hands of federal agencies for direct response to COVID-19. Phase 2 has some larger impacts that I'm going to cover in more depth than I did last week. But it has some major impacts in regards to sick leave and some other impacts as far as decision-making of your organization. It also had some public assistance program improvements and enhancements, and it also had some SBA loans that I will also cover. Phase 3 is the major one, the CARES Act that people have heard of a lot. That's the $2 trillion bill that has programs that I'm going to try and highlight today because of the subscription levels that we're seeing in the interest. So you can advance. The CARES Act, as I've talked about before, had the big ticket money items were really in 4 buckets. The first and foremost is direct payments to taxpayers. This is you know, that money going straight into the pockets of a taxpayer. And those are likely coming out, I think they're supposed to hit this week, in fact today, people's bank accounts. Also, there was the larger $5 billion program that related to banks and airlines and things that I'm not going to cover in depth because there's probably not a lot of interest in those. The third one that I want to cover is the Paycheck Protection Program that I covered in depth last week, but I also want to make sure that people understand the nature of the timing of getting to this. And then finally, the large $250 billion unemployment insurance expansion. These are benefits that people will have if they aren't working that I'm seeing might not be a decision that an employer is making, but as they talk to their employees and work with their employees, it's certainly decisions that people are making out of their individual pocketbooks. So it's important to understand in staffing that is a balance. While it's not something necessarily the employer controls, it's certainly something that an employee is considering. So you can advance. There are other larger programs here that have pretty large price tags. Next week, I'm going to cover these in more depth because there are opportunities in these other buckets of money. There are opportunities for individual nonprofits depending upon whether you're providing nutrition services, education services, health services. There are larger pockets of money that are of potential interest to various nonprofits in the central Iowa area. You can advance. But today, based upon the different questions that I'm getting, you can go to there we go, thank you. Based upon the questions I'm seeing, especially in the one-on-one requests, and I would recommend that any of you that are interested, please certainly set that time up. The interest level is on looking at the programs, which then leads into a conversation about the balance of employment generally and what they're seeing for staffing. If people are concerned about their revenues, they're obviously worried about how they maintain their staffing levels of their organization. And then also considering how they then would be able to provide the services, the meaningful services that they have been doing. How do they provide them at the same level? So the main programs that came out of the CARES Act were these small business administration loans. There are these other loans that are probably not as much interest to people, but they are available. The economic injury disaster loan also has, I put grant there, it's a $10,000 advance. That has had extreme interest. There was only $17 billion authorized under phase 2. They have had requests of over $380 billion. So I would anticipate that in any future congressional relief packages, that program will likely get a boost. However, getting a boost to cover the existing applications seems fairly large. So it's something we'll keep in mind. But people that are interested in these programs, it's just important to understand, as any grant program or loan program that people are already accessing, that if it's oversubscribed to that level, that there might be other programs that it might be more worth your time to go apply for. I put the Paycheck Protection Program, which we went through in more depth last week. I put that on here again because I think it's important to understand that this is a real boost to nonprofits. However, the SBA has identified this week that they have authorized over $250 billion of the $350 billion. So people that are interested, I think it's important that you need to get with your local banker. That is not one that you access directly through the agency. That is one that you access through a SBA certified lender. And so this is one that if you're interested in it, I would get to the bank this week and have a discussion. Nonprofits are eligible, but nonprofit is defined by the CARES Act as only 501c3s and also 501c19s. Those are veterans organizations. Think of American Legion or VFW. I put that out there. What the Paycheck Protection Program does is gives you the ability to get 8 weeks of payroll and some other hard costs like mortgage payments, rent, utilities as a forgivable loan over getting loan forgiveness over an 8-week period for your payroll. So that's why something that a lot of people are trying to get to because you don't see that sort of boost. You can advance. What's important to understand is the balance that I talk about. The balance between Paycheck Protection Program versus an employee retention tax credit is what I'm initially talking about. Those are the two main programs. On the Paycheck Protection Program, if you seek out the loan forgiveness, you are not eligible to receive an employee retention tax credit. The decision making for each nonprofit is different. And so an 8-week time period, time period might not be as valuable to somebody as maybe the ability to use payroll over the entire rest of the calendar year to get a $5,000 credit per employee based upon what the makeup of your employees look like. that's kind of the decision-making process that we're seeing for nonprofits. Is it worthwhile? Do I have a large payroll, a lot of people, or do I have a few employees that generally may not be high wage, and so it might be more valuable to be able to utilize the full calendar year to try and maximize this credit at the back end. The difference in that decision making is obviously cash now versus cash later. But that's kind of the balance that people are having to make decisions. And it's unfortunate that because of the nature of the Paycheck Protection Program's oversubscription that people are having to make that quickly. However, those are the decision makings that we're seeing. As you can see on the employee retention credit, it's a refundable credit of up to $5,000 per employee for $10,000 in wages. So it's a $5,000 credit per employee on the $10,000 that you pay. And you can see there what your eligibility would be, and suspension condition is an or based upon suspension or your revenues being down based upon a previous year. But I put these on here. These slides are available, and we're happy to talk through this specifically with anybody in a one-on-one. Next slide, please. There are other tax provisions as well that people are interested in. And again, the delay in employer payroll tax payments is something of interest for folks that maybe you get a short time relief on those payments. It is important to understand that, again, if you're looking for the loan forgiveness portion, this is not, you're not available to do that. You can see here in the top of the slide how long those delays will be. I think in the decision-making balance that we are seeing with organizations, that ultimately a deferral is not forgiveness like the PPP, which lands people more so towards that PPP. Also, I've had some questions about the charitable contributions portions, and there have been changes there to kind of give a boost and get back to a benefit on the charitable donation side. Also of note, I know that in this new normal, people will be looking for avenues as to boost, and there is the ability to pull from retirement benefits without penalty up to a certain point. Those are some of the modifications, but again, in an 880-page bill, the balance really comes down to that SBA program, PPP, and the employee retention tax credit. And again, that's a decision that people should be talking to a tax professional within the next week if they're interested in the PPP. Next slide, please. Also, as I mentioned, in this balance, it's important to understand that your employees are certainly thinking about this. There was a lot of hubbub towards the end of the passage of the CARES Act, and it was delayed for a few hours because there is an opportunity on the supplemental unemployment compensation. It's an additional bump of $600 per month, that there are people that in some ways, depending upon their wage, may actually receive an increase in income by being unemployed. So that's a decision-making process and a balance that your organization needs to think about and when working with your employees. If you don't have, and this is a discussion I've had with different nonprofits and businesses, with maybe employees that are younger or that are lower waged, that if you don't actually have work for someone, it might be a better decision for them to be home and be furloughed. The challenge there is obviously if you have dedicated employees to your mission, is making sure to keep that connection with them. But that's a decision making process that we're seeing with people. The other two major things that we're seeing on here that are of interest is generally nonprofit organizations have been covered on unemployment, many of which is self-pay. This is now covered by the federal government to hopefully save some of those costs for nonprofits. And also expanded eligibility for unemployment benefits. This is the gig economy, stay-at-home moms that are, maybe doing childcare, people that wouldn't typically be eligible for unemployment benefits. This may be something of interest as you're advising clients of something they might not be aware of. What I will say is, with the numbers that we're seeing nationwide, that's the case in Iowa, that there can be a delay at workforce development just by the nature of the profound need that's out there. But certainly it's important to understand, as you think about the balance of your employees and your nonprofit, this is a decision-making process that likely individual families are making based upon those benefits. You can advance. Last but not least, in this balance, one thing that people need to grasp as well is in the phase 2, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, there were 2 major changes that nonprofits need to think about. First of all, whether or not that it applies to them, but second of all, if it does apply, what is their obligation to their employees? First of all, there's a temporary expansion it's an Emergency Family Medical Leave Act. As you could imagine, they've really directed at COVID-19, but they've created a new category for public health emergencies, similar to, and family medical leave has, typically been for employers that have over 50 employees. That is not the case for these new changes. It applies to anybody under 500. So there's a really nice webinar and information on the NYMaster website that I would encourage people to go to. I would tell you that our Labor and Employment Department has been extremely busy since COVID-19 started. Because people are making really difficult decisions on wanting to keep their employees, but also understanding how the laws impact them and what is the best structure to keep the organization going. Also, emergency paid sick leave. Again, what typically would have been have thresholds that maybe would leave nonprofits out. This is now requiring leave for covered employees for qualifying emergencies related to the coronavirus. So providing sick leave for people to take care of a parent, to take care of a family member. Again, I would direct people to our webinar on the NYMaster website in this balance of understanding the impact to your organization. I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there that these bills were only offering programs. However, it's important to understand that there are impacts like this out there that should also impact your decision-making of your organization. All of these topics and this balance of decision-making is something that we'll cover in one-on-ones if you get them scheduled, and we're interested in talking to you further about it. And that's all I have, Grant.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Dustin. I just broadcast a message to our friends in the breakout rooms telling them to wrap up their conversations as well. It looks like we have a few participants who've been sticking around with us this morning. So I'll invite any of you to start your video or go ahead and enter a question. Or just voice your question to Dustin if you have one. So you'd be welcome to do that in these minutes that we have remaining.
And thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Dustin, I'll also tee up. I'm sorry, I feel a little bit like an octopus when I'm managing these. There's like 7 different screens I'm trying to pay attention to. We didn't talk much at the beginning about the ask line, did we?
Not much. I mentioned it, but I've tried to mention it a couple times, but certainly, let people know. And I also mentioned it last night on that KCCI town hall.
Oh, good. Okay, well, I will make sure that gets into the chat, and I'll call that out. I'm gonna go ahead and close all the rooms, and they'll close in 2 minutes. So we have 2 more minutes together.
This is Barbara Decker. This is Barbara Decker from Catholic Charities. I just wanted to ask Dustin very quickly.
Yeah.
That we work with Frank Hardy at NYMaster.
I'm sorry.
That's a story for another time, right? Anyway, I just wanted to be sure that we could still schedule a one-on-one with you to go through some of these. Okay. Very good. Thank you.
But, you know, I'll certainly let Frank know.
Yes.
And it could be that he might
Sure.
want to participate as well. But Frank
Okay.
relies pretty heavily on me when it comes to especially these SBA programs.
Yeah. So very good overview. Thanks for the
Thanks.
information.
Yeah.
Great. Well, it looks like folks are really starting to join us back here, so that's wonderful. We'll give it, we have 1 more minute left. Final things. Thanks, Bridget, for managing all of that. This is fun. I was going to tell folks after Daniel and Nicole were posting that this week's fun thing with the FFCRA with our Community Foundation staff is that we were celebrating National Grilled Cheese Day. And we had folks, they're all emailing me their pictures of grilled cheese sandwiches. And then we're going to do a matching game to see who can guess which staff member made which grilled cheese. And we're very competitive here. So I'm expecting some great participation in that. So I hope other organizations have found joy. Sally, hi. I'll keep you on. Do you want me to share what we're going to be talking about next week, or do you want to share that? You're good? I'm going to, there you go. You can do it. Great. Well, now that everybody is back with us, it looks like, I want to welcome you all back. I hope you had some good discussion in your breakout rooms. I did also, I'm going to, in the chat box to everybody, just share the article about the legislative ask line. So I know that Dustin brought that up and we referenced it at the beginning. If you're looking for some one-on-one consultation, the details around that are there. Sally, if you wanted to go ahead and just share a little bit about what we'll be discussing next week, that'd be great.
Great. Well, next week, it was interesting. There was a lot of talk about communication today in terms of leadership, and a lot of that communication centered around communicating with our teams and the people that we're working most directly with. But there's also a huge need for communication, external communication. And I know everyone's inbox is jammed full right now, and it's hard to figure out, should you be communicating and what should you be communicating, and does it really matter? Is anyone really reading anything anyway? So next week, we're going to have a presentation from Jeff White, who is the Vice President of Business Development and Strategy at Flynn Wright. They have developed this amazing deck with data and do's and don'ts and really valuable content on how to communicate externally right now and how to make your message stand out and in a good way, because I'm sure we've all seen some materials that maybe didn't quite hit the mark as intended. So I think it'll be a really good conversation. And then we can talk through maybe some of the communication challenges and resourcing and how do you prioritize when we get to the breakout groups, or if there's anything in particular about communication that people want to talk about, send it to Brianne and we'll respond to the needs of the group.
Perfect. Yes, you can absolutely email me throughout the week if you have ideas for breakouts. We do have a survey where we're trying to get some information about what will be most helpful for you. These circle conversations are really for our nonprofit leaders. I love the conversation and the information that Sally has teed up for us next week. So we hope to see you same time, same place here again next week. Meantime, search for that daily dose of joy, share it out, celebrate life's little moments with our teams, and we'll see you back here in a week. Have a great day. Bye.